Anyone who knows me knows I'm not, the bravest gamer out there. Don't get me wrong, I love a scary movie, book, or television show. But there's something about the interactivity of horror video games that makes everything feel a little too real for my liking. There just isn't a sturdy enough fourth wall for me to cower behind. At best, I play horror games unwillingly and only if, hypothetically, the company I work for tells me I have to.
Oh my god! Oh no, I don't like it!
Even then, the sort of horror game I was willing to dip my toes into never felt like true horror. I loved the Quarry, but that felt more like a playable movie. The Last of Us was also great, but tonally more of an action drama. Alan Wake 2 is a horror game through and through, and more importantly, to me at least, it's the first horror game I've ever been interested in playing. But why? What was it about Alan Wake that made me want to give it an Alan Whirl? And what kept me hooked even after I faced down terror after terror?
In a horror story, there are only victims and monsters. And the trick is not to end up as either.
First and foremost, it's important to reiterate that Alan Wake 2 is a survival horror game. It plays all the hits: limited ammo, limited healing items, safe rooms that make your dopamine absolutely pop the hell off. However, in spite of all of that, it's just as much a mystery. Once you get through the game's disorientingly gruesome intro, more on that later, you're introduced to federal agent Saga Anderson along with her partner Alex Casey, who looks suspiciously like real-life human man Sam Lake. More on that later too. Saga is in the unabashedly Lynchian locale of Bright Falls, a small town in Washington state where the residents are preparing for their annual Deer Fest celebration. Before the horror even begins, we encounter our first point of intrigue. Rose Marigold, a waitress at Bright Falls' Oh Dear Diner, greets Saga like an old friend.
I'm sorry. Who are you?
And briefly mentions a new, tragic piece of information. Saga's daughter Logan drowned some time ago in the nearby lake. This is as much news to the player as it is to Saga, who has never been to Bright Falls before and was talking to a decidedly alive Logan on the phone earlier that day. With that truly horrific mystery locked in place, the player then encounters a new mystery entirely: the introduction of our title character, canonically garbage writer Alan Wake himself. But Alan isn't in Bright Falls with Saga and Casey. Rather, he's in a shabbily appointed green room in the middle of a nightmarish New York City-esque dreamscape, the Dark Place. Alan and the player both must figure out what's going on and how to escape. At this point, the story shifts between Alan and Saga, with the two working together as best they can to unravel the mystery, mostly via brief, echoey conversations in the overlap between their two worlds. But how can they determine what's real when fiction keeps spilling into reality?
I had a flash of inspiration. The ghost of my fictional detective. A story thread I could use in my writing.
In works of fiction, there tends to be one central question that the narrative must seek to resolve. Will the protagonists end up together? Will the bad guys be brought to justice? In the case of horror fiction, the question tends to be, are they going to get out of this alive? But in Alan Wake 2, the question of whether or not you'll survive doesn't factor in. In fact, every time you do die, and I'm not ashamed to admit I experienced this a lot, the game tells you that this isn't how the story goes, a la Prince of Persia: Sands of Time. Rather, the question focuses more on figuring out just what the hell is going on. And that's what kept me invested, in spite of, or even because of, the horror elements at play. A lesser game would have seen me calling it quits after the showdown in the morgue, but even that early into the game, I was too invested to let it go. If I gave up every time a naked zombie beat me to death in a police station, how would I ever unravel the story's mysteries? The narrative promises that you can write your way out. You can make the horror stop by cracking the case and fixing reality. So I kept playing, because I needed to know what was happening and if I could make it stop. I needed to answer that question.
Did you write these pages, Mr. Wake?
I'm trying to remember. It doesn't make sense.
Beyond the compelling narrative, I was further driven by the tone of the game. Alan Wake 2 is overwhelmingly creepy, but not constantly frightening. Even in the instances when you aren't at risk of getting got by an aggressive shadow or zombified deputy, you still can't escape that gnawing feeling that something could go wrong at any moment. You could, for instance, get jump scared so badly by a photo negative of Alan Wake's face that you drop your controller and scare the bejesus out of your cat. Hypothetically. Not that that ever happened to me. I'm very brave. We already established this. The truly impressive part is how this stays consistent between the two major set pieces of the game, Bright Falls and the Dark Place. On the surface, these two locales are wildly different, but each one possesses the same oppressive sense of unease. In fact, this commonality between the two areas only amplifies that feeling. The two places are so different, and yet, no matter where you go, you can't escape, much like Alan Wake himself. They shouldn't feel the same, and yet Remedy has managed to make them feel like echoes of one another, two sides of the same freaky little coin.
I had a light now. I needed to get back to the subway station entrance.
Alan is trapped in the dark place by the narrative he can't complete. Saga is trapped in Bright Falls by the mysteries she can't solve. And the player has one foot in each world. It's a delicate balancing act, and Remedy manages to pull it off effortlessly. So, given how well they nailed the fundamentals of the game, it makes sense that they decided to get a little weird with it. Because yeah, this game gets weird. Heck, it starts weird. The very first thing that happens in the game, before you meet Saga, before you even meet the titular Wake himself, you find yourself navigating the woods of Bright Falls as an extremely naked, wet, middle-aged man, fumbling his way through the foliage, genitalia flapping in the breeze, in order to escape mysterious masked assailants. It's a real wait, what the hell was that moment that both introduces you to the world of the game and makes you wonder just what other weird stuff you're going to encounter. Like, if we're starting the game with some good old-fashioned full frontal nudity, it's only going to get stranger from here, right? Yeah, I would say so. In the game's third chapter, you finally get control of Alan Wake himself. As previously mentioned, he's stuck in the green room of In Between with Mr. Door, a talk show hosted by a man who's approximately as sinister as every other late-night talk show host. I'm just saying, if you told me James Corden is an interdimensional entity who holds the power of traveling between alternate worlds while existing in all of them at once, I would be like, that makes sense to me, but I still don't want to watch Carpool Karaoke.
Are you okay there, my friend? You look like you've been cooped up in the writer's room for a few too many years.
In the midst of figuring out how to exit the building, Alan can choose to stop and watch the nearby TV, which is playing a live-action interview with him and real-life human man Sam Lake. There are many moments where the game uses FMV, like the Adventure Brothers commercials Saga can encounter in the previous section of the game, but this is by far the most unsettling, as you watch Alan Wake struggle to understand how he even got on this show, all while Sam Lake is absolutely crushing it next to him. Truly, he's a dream talk show guest.
Thank you. That means so much to me.
This is only the first bizarre moment on the talk show set, but it's not the last, and it's certainly not the weirdest. Of course, I'm talking about the We Sing section of the game, which sees Alan Wake 2 transform into a nightmarish rock opera as full of killer choreo as it is actual killers. Did I die a lot in this part? Yeah, for sure. Did I mind? No, because it meant I got to keep experiencing the strangest, coolest thing I've ever seen in any kind of video game, horror or otherwise. Alan Wake 2 truly was an unexpected standout in a year chock full of stellar games that I, by all accounts, should have been more interested in playing. But it was this intriguing, creepy, weird story that kept me coming back for more. The Quarry and The Last of Us were great intro-level horror games, but after playing Alan Wake 2, I'm way more interested in the horror genre as a whole. I'm no longer afraid of my own proverbial dark place, and I feel emboldened to try games that I otherwise would have been too much of a coward to even consider. Now, thanks to Alan, Saga, and all the folks at Remedy, I'm more afraid than ever, and I love it.
First things first. What's your name?
My name is Alan Wake. I'm a writer. I've been...
Wake? Where did you come from? You've been missing for 13 years.
13?